Welcome back to another episode of the React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by Snow, because nothing's better at turning my driveway into an obstacle course full of pain and regret. Episode 285, Expo dominates the App Store, and other news.
Robin, I noticed that your background's a little different. Is that a virtual background? Or are you using a virtual background on Zoom? Or what is this?
It's a pretty expensive virtual background if that's the case. No, I moved. I'm in a new house. I moved over the holidays.
Congratulations.
So I'm in my new office. I had to deck it out for the recording today because it's all hardwood floors and my old office was carpet, so it was pretty echoey in here.
Just add some reverb.
Yeah, but I'm really enjoying having my own office. I'm not sharing it with my husband anymore.
We don't get to hear Travis in the background of recordings anymore? Usually you would kick him out, though.
Oh, yeah, I would always kick him out for recordings, which he hated. So now he has his space and I have my space.
He should have just joined us and talked about React Native
that
stuff.
was a missed opportunity.
How much does Travis know about React Native? That's what I want to know.
Not a lot.
So he's not a software developer, right?
He's not a software developer. He does a lot of, he's been learning a lot of coding stuff for his job because he works in manufacturing and they have a lot of tools and stuff that they do for reports and stuff.
He's an engineer, right?
He is. He's a chemical engineer by training, and he's moved up the ranks now. He's an engineering manager, but he does a lot of stuff in Excel, and he's been doing some Python and some C# and .NET, but it's not his primary job. It's kind of on the side.
You probably inspired him with all your coding talk during these recordings. And he's like, I got to get into this.
Well, he saw me change careers and he's like, how hard could it be?
How hard could it be? That sounds like unnecessarily dismissive. Oh, if Robin can do it.
My words, not his. Don't come for him.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Don't come for him.
Let's not get Travis in trouble here. All right, let's do intros. I'm Jamin Holmgren, your host, friendly CTO of Infinite Red. I am living in the soggy Pacific Northwest.
Oh, it's so soggy right now.
Oh, man.
It is here.
I can literally, while where I'm sitting, I can literally hear the gutter just like drip, 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 because it's just full of so much water.
Yeah. Part of my yard is just full of water, as usual. Anybody who's followed me on Twitter
Didn't you build your house in swampland, Jamin?
You know, in retrospect, maybe that was a bad idea.
Have you checked your backyard this morning or not yet?
I assume there's still a yard there underneath the water, but I did look out. Yeah.
You didn't even need to put in that swimming pool.
I've heard that joke before. Yeah, that's... Yeah.
If you didn't know, Jamin chronicled his putting in his above ground pool in a particularly epic Twitter thread a while back. We'll link it in the show notes. It's a good read.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, it was quite a job. But right now it is a pool surrounded by water. So anyway, I am joined today by my charismatic co-hosts, Robin and Mazen. Robin Heinz is Director of Engineering at Infinite Red. She's located west of Portland, Oregon, with her chemical engineer engineer manager husband, Travis, and 2 kids, and has specialized in React Native for the past 6 years. We also have Mazen Chami, who lives in Durham, North Carolina, with his wife and toddler. He is a former pro soccer player and coach, and is a senior React Native engineer, also here at Infinite Red. All right, before we get into this, let's hear from our sponsor.
Infinite Red is a premier React Native design and development agency located fully remote in the US and Canada. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next React Native project, hit us up at infinite.red/React Native. Don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio Podcast.
Okay, thank you. Let's get into our topic for today. Today we're going to do another it's one of those we react to news type episodes where we're going to take a few different headlines around the React Native universe and react to them and give our thoughts on what's happening. We haven't done one of these in a while. And I think that, it was a little bit of a slow news. I think through like Q4, it was a little bit of a slow news cycle for React Native in some ways, but there were some important changes still with that. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yep. We'll start off with Expo SDK 50. It's not the official release, but the beta has been released.
Might be out by the time people listen to this. I don't know.
Which should get my butt in gear because my app's still on 48. So yeah, Expo SDK 50 beta is out. Includes quite a few new things. So a lot of these things were announced in the Expo launch party, which we actually did an episode about a while back. And now we're starting to actually see them land in the SDK, starting with the Expo DevTools plugin API, which is a big deal, I think, more for library authors. If you're just a day-to-day Expo user, this probably won't be something that you'll use, but library authors, I think, are pretty excited about this because it helps them debug and interact with their library as they're developing it, just to make sure it's working and demonstrate it. So if you're a library author, check that out. What else do we have? Expo SQLite next. If you use SQLite in Expo, they've rewritten it completely. Sort of a modernization, I think, bringing it more in parity with what's out there today for web and Node.js, including like synchronous and asynchronous methods, support for prepared statements. I'm just looking at the release statement now, update callbacks, and the blob data type. Yeah, a bunch of other things.
This is
SQLite's really cool.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, this is a cool feature because a lot of times we don't think about offline mode first. And this is one of those that enables us to do that. And I think just the ability to also bring it in line with the web API, because that's where I feel like most people that use SQLite are familiar with it kind of coming from. So making it easier to read and understand in that sense helps. But again, going back to my initial point, like we need to be paying more attention to offline mode first. Again, some apps, it's not in their, their user experience that they want the whole offline mode. Some do. And this kind of gives us that ability.
I think there's probably a lot of apps that don't think about offline mode that probably should think about offline mode. It's easy to forget it.
Yeah.
So turn your Wi-Fi off and test your app.
Yeah.
Well, try to use your app first.
Yeah, try to use your app. Can you use it at all?
Yeah.
Exactly.
This isn't in our notes, but there was a tweet by Guillermo from Vercel talking about how like mobile apps are not truly like offline first, because he showed a screenshot of that and said basically like PWAs and websites are the future. He actually got a lot of flack for this. I think somewhat deserved, to be honest, because he kind of cherry picked, what he was saying. Like here are some apps that don't work well without internet, and they were apps that like no matter what you do, just the nature of the app wouldn't ever work
like,
well.
Would you ever have a need to use it with, like, if you didn't have internet?
Exactly.
You wouldn't. Yeah.
And but even with that said, there's still a good point there that if we don't, as mobile developers, take it seriously, it's not going to work. It's not going to work well. We're just going to make some assumptions that we're connected to the web. I think that actually websites have a harder time combating that because the only way you get there is through the web.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that, I don't know, mobile apps still have an advantage there.
Well, we live in a day and age where there's so many free public Wi-Fi networks and
everyone has most people have really great cellular data too.
Exactly. And you don't have to worry about it. But there's also like we don't have to go deep into it, but a discussion about like if you, as a developer, still implement it and store some data in it that gets hydrated from your web. So you always have, like, maybe I'm thinking more e-commerce related apps. Like if you have a product timeline, instead of fetching every single time, you might want to put some sort of rehydration policy around when to update your SQLite database so it's always pulling from the latest, or maybe even some sort of socket when the product goes offline, sold out. You get, you write to your SQL database and that gets updated there. So not just offline mode, but then also some other realistic places you can use it. Because imagine having 1,000 data records and just storing it in your state. that could get a little clunky over time.
Yeah. I worked for a company prior to Infinite Red, and they use SQLite extensively because their entire business model was like taking apps and having customers customize them, like top down, everything. And so basically they would bundle up all the customizations and then like send an entire SQLite database to the client to install. So like it was a really critical part of their app. But what's next?
So we had Mark Rasavi on a while back to talk about Vision Camera, which is, the sort of the gold standard of camera libraries within the ecosystem. But Expo also with SDK 50 is bringing some updates and modernizations to the Expo camera library. It's kind of odd because usually we're used to Expo libraries being the top, but Mark put so much work into Vision Camera. There's just no way to ever like
Expo themselves. They say
it. Yeah.
They even mentioned they're like, we expect Expo Camera to work for most of your needs, but if you have more advanced use cases, use Vision Camera. Yeah. Like everyone kind of agrees that it's the best for the big stuff.
You know what it reminds me of? One time when I was a kid, we were so we used to like go drive around and look at Christmas lights when we were kids. Just look at houses that had decorations.
I love doing that. Travis hates doing that, and I have to drag him. But I love it so much.
Well, as a kid, I loved it. As a dad, I get it. But you know what? I should still do it with my kids. Anyway, so we get to this house, and it is absolutely gorgeous. There's so much going on. It is packed. It felt like no square foot on the entire property that didn't have something going on. Just an absolute monster of an incredible thing. And the next house over had one strand of lights, and it made an arrow just pointing to the other house.
That's so smart.
I would do that and write ditto in lights. You're like, yeah. So that's funny.
So they didn't quite mail it in. Like Expo didn't quite mail it in like that, but they did say, go use Vision Camera.
We'll have to do that next year because our new neighbors apparently go all out.
No, you should get in a competition. Like go get like tons and tons and just try to fight.
Full National Lampoon.
Sure. Exactly. There's also Expo Fingerprint, and what does that do?
So the change in Expo in SDK 50 looks like it's Expo Fingerprint and integration into the Expo GitHub action. And what Expo Fingerprint does is it basically validates your JavaScript bundle against a particular build of your app to make sure they are compatible. So if the fingerprint changes, then your bundle might not be compatible with your app, and this just lets you know, and it hooks into the Expo GitHub action so it can run as part of your CI, like, hey, your fingerprint is not compatible.
This is one you wouldn't use on a day-to-day basis, probably just on your CI to do like a final check before going out to the stores.
Yeah, and I think that there's some interesting challenges they have here with over-the-air updates that...
Right. I think that, this is probably especially relevant for using EAS update to make sure you're not pushing a JavaScript bundle that's going to break.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as Expo and React Native in general become more and more mainstream, which is happening, the companies that are using it are bigger and the stakes are higher. And so they need to have these tools in place. It makes sense. The big one, of course, is Expo Router version 3.
I feel like we're going to have to do a whole separate episode just about this because the list of changes in V3 is enormous. They've done a ton of work to this library.
Yeah. I think the one that we'll all appreciate, and you mainly, Jamin.
I was going to mention it. Go for it.
Is that you can now it's configurable, and it doesn't have to, you don't need the app directory to basically run the router. And
you can configure which directory is your source.
And this was a conflict with Ignite, which has been around forever. Yes. And it has forever had an app directory. I guess we had a source directory for a while, but we have forever had this app directory. And then what Expo Router did was come in and said, no, that's ours. You go somewhere else. And so it was a little bit like, oh, come on, really? Like, we got to change everything we're doing. I understand why. It was sort of to conform to the next standard, that they're doing with their router. But with enough whining and complaining from me and maybe some others, Evan finally included, okay, yeah, you can configure where it is. But we don't recommend it.
I know.
He
My
said.
favorite part is he says, well, not recommended. You can now change the after. I was like,
thanks, Evan.
That's Evan talking to Jamin directly.
I know.
But thank you for doing it anyway. We appreciate
you for doing it because, and the reality is, like, I reviewed a code base just yesterday that was using Expo Router, and it looked weird because you had an app directory and then components next to the app. Like, what? Components aren't part of the app? Like, come on. Anyway, yes, thank you. Yes, thank you for letting me rant one more time. I promise I won't anymore. So what I would recommend then is to configure it and, go with like /app/router or something like that.
So that change is our favorite, but it's hardly the most significant in V3. Expo Router is now faster and smaller. They introduced experimental support for API routes, a la Next.
Wait a minute here.
Next.js.
What do you mean API routes?
I think like Next.js, like you could basically generate an API via your web.
Hold up.
That's big.
Is this like a Next competitor
that's
now?
What I'm.
Is
that's
this
what I was
going after
like.
Next?
This feels like Next.js is got some competition.
Okay, we need to have Evan on.
I think we need
What were you
dive.
saying before we started, Robin? About Evan?
What?
Evan has no lack of...
he has no lack of cheekiness.
Yeah, I love it. Evan does so much for the React Native community.
We
love you,
appreciate
Evan.
and love Evan so much for all you do. He's
So,
actually
Expo
going to come
Router.
up later in this episode too. So
Of course he will.
But we should have him on for a Expo
yes,
Router
we should
discussion.
have an
'Cause it's big.
Expo Router, the sequel, because we had him on when it was pretty new.
Well, I'm gonna say let's move on then. There are other changes, but let's leave that for then, and let's move to the next thing.
So the next thing, I have to scroll down so far to see the next thing because there's so many Expo Router changes.
So I do want to mention React Native 0.73 came out. That is going to be its own episode. It's going to be kind of late. We're sorry about that, but that will be coming out. We're still coordinating to try to get that. But there's plenty of changes in 73. It's a fantastic release. We will talk about that. Reactotron 3. Mazen, you want to talk about that one?
Yeah. So this one, I think we announced it via our social media channels and our React Native newsletter, but 3.0 is out. It's much faster. There's a really cool GIF out there of comparing the old version, so 2.x to 3.0, and you can kind of see the big boot time. We've really optimized it. A lot of the team here at Infinite has put a lot of time into it. I do like that you don't have to hook up console.tron anymore. It just listens.
That's
to
a
console.log.
really nice change.
Yeah.
That was always one of the more tricky things to configure because you were basically just like modifying the like monkey patching the console object, and now it's so much easier because console log is just already on everyone's fingertips.
And all the TypeScript errors. And now that we're strict mode, imagine all the errors, Jamin. It's crazy.
I know.
Oh yeah,
just
TypeScript
helping us
did
program.
not like
It did not.
console.tron
There was a lot
at all.
of we did have a lot of complaints from the community about Android being very buggy. We have fixed that. We do realize that there might still be some edge cases out there, but it does handle a big majority of the issues. One of them was just being like the whole ADB reverse tunnel, which can get very frustrating.
We have some other ideas on how to make that even better, where we'll detect when that is the case and just give you a button to click. It will actually be easier than not using Reactotron at all, where you'd have to figure that out. Reactotron will actually be an assistant that detects these states and says, yo, just click this button, we'll fix it for you.
Exactly. You could use Command K now to get you directly to the timeline. So that's a quick shortcut.
You can just clear it, right? Command K.
Yep, to clear the timeline. Sorry, that's what I'm saying. And then, part of all this, it's now a monorepo setup. So we've kind of future-proofed this a lot better. So you will get the direct errors from your app in the red box. So instead of bundle.js line 55,000, it'll directly point you to your file and tell you what the error actually is. And in my opinion, that's also probably part of why we have the stronger TypeScript type support within the repo to make sure, we're doing this right.
Yeah, we've put a lot more work in it. So Reactotron, for the longest time, we used it. Lots of people used it. People have used it. Like I heard from one guy that uses it. His entire company uses it, and it's they have something like 20 million users or something. Reactotron is free, open source. You should be using it if you're building anything in React Native. People like it.
It's an essential part of my daily workflow.
Yes, exactly. But one thing about it was we kind of didn't develop it much for about 3 years. And it was because we lost our primary maintainer and people just told us, no, it works. Like, you don't need to mess with it. And so we focused on some other things. But we're back. We're doing we have new maintainer core group, and we're making some great changes. So definitely check that out. So speaking of Evan Bacon.
I was going to say, speaking of Evan, he's back.
He put out a great blog post about, well, it's titled, Who's Using Expo Open Source in 2024? And
this is a very impressive list.
Yeah.
Almost 1,600 apps, probably over 1,600 by the time you look at this, because he keeps improving it. And he said that he was detecting apps on the iOS App Store that were using libraries from the Expo SDK, including React Navigation, and he lists them all. It is an incredible list of apps. I mean,
absolutely
it's just
mind-blowing.
So much.
I guarantee if some of our listeners look at this, they will be shocked at the number of apps. And I was too, because I just realized a bunch of apps I use on a daily basis are React Native. I didn't know they were
right, because this is essentially a list of React Native apps as well. Like, because if they're using React Navigation and or Expo, like these are.
And I recognize some of our clients.
I do. There's some of our clients. Mercari is one. Gas Buddy is another. There's also a handful that we can't talk about by name, but we are very proud to see on this list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, if it's a really good, smooth one, then it's probably Infinite Red worked on it. And if it's not, then it's one of our competitors.
And if you see one on here that you're a little bit like, all right, you guys can do better, have them contact us, please.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a good sponsorship right there.
Yeah. And if you are a developer of one of these apps that are on here, please reach out to us too. We'd like to have you on Real Life React Native at some point to kind of talk about your app and how you've gotten your app to be so successful on the store, and even just working with React Native. I think a lot of people would love to hear from you that are working on it.
Yeah, the email for that is rnradio@infinite.red, and it goes to all three of us, and we will see it and we will respond.
And if you don't contact us, we might start cold calling you. So
we want to talk to people. We really do want to talk to people who are shipping.
We want to know the story behind like all the apps on this list, how you're using Expo, how you're using React Native, what your story is.
We have 1,600 stories to tell right now.
Yep.
So reach out. By the way, that's not all React Native apps. That is just the ones that use some sort of Expo open source.
Yep. That's incredible.
So coming out of nowhere, this guy, Anis, I think is how you say his name. I connected with him on Twitter a while ago. I think he joined Twitter last fall. He's a senior React Native engineer at Basement Sports, and he published this incredible React Native Advanced Guide.
It's blowing my mind. Yeah. I mean, we only found out about it. He published it last week. It's brand new.
Yeah.
It has 500 and over 500 stars.
Is thorough. This is incredible. If you're a React Native engineer, especially one who's still learning, or even one who's thought they were done learning, this covers everything.
Yeah. I mean, I am kind of blown away by how much is going on.
Just hitting the major sections. Ultimate guide on the new architecture in depth, including CodeGen, JSI, Hermes, turbo modules, Fabric, Yoga. Ultimate guide on debugging, profiling, and advanced optimization. All of the performance improvements, profiling, using the debugger, using Chrome DevTools. Ultimate guide on component testing with React Native testing library. Guide on Hermes and static Hermes. Virtual lists optimization, like flat list, section lists, etc. It just goes on and on and on.
It goes on and on.
In-app purchases,
this is incredible.
Hooks.
We need to have this guy on the show because I want to know.
Yeah, I'm gonna reach out.
I want to know how this came to be, and we'll put it in the show notes like everything else that we've talked about. And please check it out and read through it if you're a React Native developer, which I would assume that you are if you're listening.
Yeah, it's called React Native Advanced Guide, and it's on GitHub, and it looks like it's totally free, so go check it out. There's also a new styling system out. Mazen, what's that all about?
Yeah, so this is called StyleX. My understanding is this is the styling library, CSS in JavaScript, that Meta is currently using over there. I want to say they're using it on their React side, but then also the React Native, with their React Native stuff. So, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, all their products are using this as their styling library. So I think a lot of different libraries that we see, or that we've used in the past, don't go about it the same way this library does. They do something that's very interesting where it's similar to Style Sheet. So you know how you do stylesheet.create and you create your object. That's how you set up your styles also. But at the same time, you can use them differently. So it's also kind of hard to describe over voice, but they have something called like stylex.props. So what that does is you pass in your different stylex.create that you've done, and then you put it into a props, and then it spreads it into your div or your view and all that kind of stuff. So it's very different than how we're used to things. I would recommend the users not just to jump into it right away. Just take a look at it, see how they're doing things, and then kind of assess for yourself if you need to use it. It's just like, it's a fast, scalable, new library out there. I don't know if I'd say new, actually. It's been around for a while.
Well, it's from Meta, and it's supposedly the styling library that they use to build like Facebook.com and Instagram.com and
it's type safe, it's composable, it's all that kind of stuff that we would want these to be, and kind of gets you to the end goal.
At the time it was announced, its React Native support was still a work in progress, but they are working on it or are done now. I don't know.
I'm curious to use this on a real project. Of course, at Infinite Red, we use a variety of different styling solutions, but the one we generally reach for is what we do in Ignite, which is basically bare objects that are typed with TypeScript. And we usually precede them with like a $, and it'll be like $container or something like
we don't
that.
Even use React Native style sheets. It's just,
not at all.
We haven't found a styling system that really meets all of our needs, so we just
I do like Tailwind. I think Tailwind has some benefits, but it's more opinionated than usually our clients like to be. So if someone comes to us and says, I like Tailwind, then we'd do Tailwind. That would not be a problem. But it'd be really interesting to try this on a project and see what we can learn from that. And maybe this is something that will finally unseat the plain old JavaScript object.
I kind of want to go off on a limb here and just talk about another styling library that's out there that was just released recently. And it's React Native Unistyles. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Jacek released it, and I've been seeing it used a lot recently. He does a lot of what it seems like is like new architecture support, C++ and JSI bindings, and it's supposed to be very fast because he kind of does everything kind of underneath the hood, essentially. Again, a very different way of doing things, but I think it's pretty cool. And he has a benchmark on his repo where it's rendering 1,000 views with Unistyles is the same as Style Sheet. So it's pretty comparable out there.
So lots of new styling solutions to try for React Native developers, sounds like.
This one's more in-depth, I would say, than the StyleX because it does have ability for theming and everything that you would need in a style dictionary or something like that. But yeah.
This has been out for a little while, but since we haven't done one of these episodes in a while, we haven't talked about it, and that is that Amazon is now listed in the React Native showcase. They have 5 apps in there. It's really cool. I think, it's kind of been a well-known secret, a poorly kept secret.
It's been a poorly kept secret.
That Amazon uses React Native extensively. I mean, our CIO Gant had actually given a talk there many years ago in front of 300 Amazon engineers about React Native, and they've been slowly and steadily moving forward with that. So now they're listed in the showcase, and we can talk about how Amazon is also leaning heavily into React Native. It really just, from the big companies, kind of just leaves Apple and Google out there with their operating systems and not wanting to
yeah, I don't think Apple
system.
Apple and Google are going to go cross-platform
exactly
anytime soon.
Yeah. But I mean, you've got Microsoft heavily involved in this. I mean, they're doing so much stuff in React Native, obviously Amazon. Then there's also Shopify. I mean, there's just a number of really big companies that are adopting React Native at scale. And
well,
Amazon,
you can see just from Evan's list the number of huge like big name folks that are using React Native.
Exactly.
I guess Meta itself.
Obviously Facebook.
Yes. Okay, so we're out of time, but I do want to mention that you can see all of these and a lot more if you sign up for our wonderful newsletter at reactnativenewsletter.com. We send out, I think it's a monthly now, newsletter with a roundup of all of the news, all the links that you need to see and none that you don't. It's a really great way to stay on top of the React Native world and what's happening. It's really well designed and written by Derek Greenberg, who is here at Infinite Red. He's the editor-in-chief of that newsletter. So go check it out, reactnativenewsletter.com. That's it for this episode. Robin, do you have a mom joke to take us out?
I do. This is even though we're a little past the holidays, here's a holiday-themed one for you. If there were 11 elves and another one came along, what would he be? The 12th.
Oh, no.
Thank you to the joke master, Carlin Isaacson. He's the source of like all my jokes these days. All right,
everybody. We will see you all next time.
bye.
As always, thanks to our production team with editor Todd Worth, our assistant editor and episode release coordinator, yours truly, Jed Bartosky, our director of marketing, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Derek Greenberg. Our producer and host is Jamin Holmgren, and executive producers and hosts are Robin Hines and Mazen Chame. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/React Native. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe to React Native Radio wherever you get your podcasts.